Alright, what's up everybody? So, this is gonna seem a little bit like a time jump, no pun intended, because I am still reacting to the TV show Dog over on my channel as we speak. However, in my own time, I have of course binged through the show like a complete maniac. How could you not? What an absolutely phenomenal ride it was. It is, I'd more like to say, I have no doubt in my mind I'm gonna be creating a loop for myself here, where I'm gonna be watching through this show several more times over the next couple of years, revisiting it all, you know, of course making sure that I manage to actually keep track of all the journeys that characters individually go through. It's, I mean, everything about it is great, right? From the casting to the characters in general, the storyline, the mystery. I don't need to tell you any of this, but the thing is that coming off of the ending, I have some thoughts, and I really wanted to lay them out there for you all. I wanted to have basically an open discussion with anybody here that's a fan of the show. Yeah, because it's this weird phenomenon where what I really did not see coming, and what surprised me the most by far, finishing Dog finally, right, is that the final episode, the way that it all ended, may have as well changed my personal perception towards the show entirely. Basically, the best way for me to probably explain that is that I look at Dog now as a chessboard, right? And it's the way that Adam, for example, and Eve, Martha, you know, the old Martha that we see, even Claudia, you could say, the way they started to approach this universe is like a chessboard. They were very strategic in their moves. They were constantly thinking about all the pawns that they had to be bringing to different positions. That's what Dog ultimately became. But when I started Dog, I felt like one of those chess pieces myself, or rather, I felt like I was directly relating to characters who were these pawns, these pieces on the chessboard. When you go back to the very first episode and we meet a character like Jonas, but also, for example, Ulrich, I think is a great example. Ulrich is probably among my favorite characters, if not my actual favorite characters. He did a lot of stuff wrong over the course of the show, right? I mean, he cheated on his own wife. He, well, killed a kid, wanted to at least, didn't manage to actually succeed in doing so, although he had some reasons for that that could of course be very much explained. But Ulrich wasn't the most moral of characters by any means. However, he did have a very relatable, you know, well, he had a tragic past and he had a relatable story that you felt connected towards, because not only had he lost his own brother way back in the days, 1986, of course, he also loses his son, Mikkel, and tries everything that he can to get him back. In the process, he's not really being treated too well by Hannah. He's a character that you can only, I feel, my personal opinion, root for over the course of the series. And, you know, obviously, we're going to be spoiling the show here. It doesn't really end too well for him. But that's the thing. Dog is the kind of show that makes you really relate to its characters, that kind of places you in their shoes, that makes you root for them, and it's that genuine empathy, that genuine connection you feel to them that I think drives you in wanting to uncover the mystery behind it all just as much as they do. Although the mystery itself is very interesting, and we see characters from the start that, you know, you have a hard time putting into place what exactly is going on when, for example, somebody like Noah shows up and you see him across timelines still looking the exact same way for the first time. Or you see an older Jonas, the stranger, right? Who at that point you don't even know his identity yet, but he clearly knows more and writes on that little bit of newspaper, when is Mikkel? It's what he writes. And, you know, we see Mikkel, of course, ending up in the past. Very gradually, Dog builds on that mystery, starts to explain and uncover some of the layers of it, and it takes you a long time to really make sense of how that all works. The fact that we have these several timelines that basically play synchronously with each other, the fact that characters can technically exist in different forms in the same timeline, therefore too, because when we realized that it was Mikkel all along who was Jonas' dad, Michael, we also realized there that for 10 years these two characters existed simultaneously, coexisted next to each other, which is, it's all these bizarre concepts that are incredibly hard to grasp, right? And in the meantime, you have this relatable story, you're trying to find out who actually performed all these experiments on the kids, You're trying to get or root, right, for Ulrich to reunite with Mikkel and to get him back to the usual times. You're rooting for the characters to finally break the cycle and break the loop. But this is where Doc suddenly starts to very gradually, but several times, explain that that is basically not possible. We get confronted with a reality check multiple times, starting I think from about the end of the first season to basically the entirety of the second season, where the first time I think that it happens is Ulrich trying to break that cycle and killing young Helge, supposedly, until we find out young Helge never actually died. He just wakes up from literally being punched what should have been to death, and therefore didn't happen, gets sent back in time, basically to the time where he belonged, and all is well and everything continues the way it was. We see a character like Helge who is trying to stop himself. I mean, you know, when I'm talking about Helge now, I mean the old version of Helge is trying to stop the relatively mature version of Helge, telling him not to go along with what Noah is telling him to do, and then in an ultimate attempt wants to kill himself, but ends up killing his older self instead. And it's constantly these kinds of surprises that Doc pulls, right? Where, you know, we find that out about Egon. Oh, Claudia was trying to prevent Egon's death because she saw it in the newspaper, and actually ends up being sort of responsible for it herself. We have several of these occasions playing out that tell us this loop cannot be broken. And that's a fascinating concept, because what it makes you realize is that to really get to a solution here, you have to think outside of the box. And ultimately, that is what, well, three characters tried to do in a way, right? There was Adam, who was trying to basically break the loop by finding its origin point, which ended up never really existing. You had a character like Martha, who wanted things to continue because she had a son. Supposedly that was the origin point, I guess, right? That's what she probably figured as well. I'm not really too sure about that, to be honest. But she was trying to maintain things the way they were because she simply saw it as a better alternative than having it all destroyed the way that Adam wanted things to be. And then we had somebody like Claudia, who had similar motives than all these other characters. Like, she also did it for personal reasons in a way, because she wanted Regina to live. But she actually was capable of thinking outside of the box, realizing that there was never an origin point, there was an origin world. That's where the solution should have been found all along. And I think it's kind of genius, man, because it's not really explained too much in detail, I think, in the show, what it is that actually got Claudia to reach these kinds of conclusions. We can only imagine that she, you know, did most of that digging in her own head, started to realize some of these things. One thing that she mentions is that there are certain characters here that are born out of other characters because of the time travel. Therefore, going back to the origin world, you can basically draw out the family tree and you can reach certain conclusions which characters would have still existed in an origin world and which characters wouldn't. We literally see some of that, of course, in the very ending of the show, where characters like Hannah and Katharina, there is, of course, you know, Wooler and Benny, there is Peter, Doppler. All these characters, they get to survive. You know, I think there's supposed to be Ben Doppler as well, right? And Claudia herself, of course. Regina ends up surviving. These characters never spawned out of relations that were formed because of the time travel. And that's why they were always there. This also means that the professor was always there. And this is why I'm sure Claudia must have very quickly realized that, like, okay, what could have caused this accident to have happened that created these two parallel worlds next to the origin world? Who could have been possibly involved with that? There's not a lot of characters here that should have been part of that origin world, but hey, look, there's a professor obsessed with time travel all along. He must be the one. I think that's how she ultimately reached, at least partially so, that particular conclusion, figured out an out-of-the-box solution, an actual cause of the situation itself, and then gets to fix it. And that's where we get to the ending of Dark, where that situation is ultimately fixed, and that's great to see. But once again, it brings along with it a reality check that was actually a little bit tough on me to process, because I simultaneously realized that, technically speaking, it was all kind of a lie. Did any of it actually even exist? why did I care so much about these characters who were put in very desperate situations when there was never really any preventing them anyway? There was never really any saving any of these situations either. It's explained a lot throughout the show that certain things just play out the way they do because, hey, there never really was an origin to them, right? We simply have to put the places back, or the pieces back in the place that they belong, is the way that Claudia herself, for example, very much talks about this game constantly, and therefore has certain characters perform certain actions that were always simply done that way. So there never was a point where any of those actions had made any sense, or where they spawned from very necessarily more, for example, devastating causes. They always played out the way they played out. This was simply a system. This was like, I'd almost compare it like it's a diorama. You know, it's like one of these boxes that you get to look inside of. You get to see what somebody made in them. You get to see a system. In this case, you see like this network of cogs that are all sort of spinning into gear, right? And then you are able to go back out of it and be confronted with actual reality again, which was the origin world. But that's ultimately what Dark is. It's nothing more than a simulation. And that's a very hard realization for me to process. Because once again, I don't in any way, I want to make that very clear, I don't say this to discredit the show or something, by no means. It's just that I realized that I cared so much about all the events that were going on. I wanted things to reach a good conclusion. I wanted characters to get endings that they deserved. They never really ended up doing so. In fact, a lot of characters by the end of the show, by the 3rd season, we see what the outcome for them looks like, and in many cases, it didn't really end too well. Ulrich ends up simply being stuck in that ward. Was promised by Katarina that she would be saving him from it, never actually ends up doing so. In fact, Katarina gets killed by her own mom. We see Hannah, who gets killed by Jonas, who of course does end up turning into Adam. We see Peter, who, it was already teased to us earlier in Season 3 that he actually ends up dying by Noah, but then we see how it happens. The fact that Elizabeth literally gets attacked there by a child rapist. And that scene, oh my god, made me so damn uncomfortable, right? And in a last-ditch attempt by Peter to rescue his daughter, actually ends up dying in the process, is never even really gonna realize whether his daughter made it out of that situation or what happened as a result. Thankfully, Elizabeth did of course end up killing the guy, but all these characters get such tragic endings to them that it's a little hard to swallow sometimes for me as a viewer, right? Whereas, once again, I realize by the end of it now as well, it doesn't matter that much, because at the end of the day, this was all a simulation, and it's almost funny to come to the conclusion that the professor, in an attempt to, because that's what he all did it for, right? The professor was just trying to introduce time travel here to try and get his son back, and his son's wife, his granddaughter, who had actually all died in a car accident. After he had had this argument with them, that left a huge emotional impact on him, and it was that devastation that ultimately got him to try and invent this time machine. In the process, he created, by accident, these 2 parallel worlds that would actually end up solving the situation for himself automatically after a bunch of tragedy happened within those 2 separate worlds, but it just, once again, played out like a system. But in the end, it's actually a failed experiment that successfully did manage to bring him back his family. So it was a success after all. However, it spawned a lot of tragedy again, sort of a tragedy in a vacuum. Am I making sense? I guess it's kind of like a black hole or something, which the professor talks about a lot over the course of the show. It's that realization that to me is incredibly fascinating. Because by the end of it all, what Dark actually delivered to us was an incredibly human, relatable story. My favorite episode by far has to be Season 2, Episode 6, where we see so many of these characters in happier times. We go back to the summer where Michael was about to be committing suicide. We see Jonas trying to stop him in doing so, confronting his dad with the fact that he knows the truth and seeing the relief on his dad's face. We see other characters from the entire cast going to Katarina and Ulrich's party and having a good time there while the music is playing. We see Martha and Jonas, who are having some of their best moments that they possibly could, even if Jonas himself is a little bit confused how this all came to be. But it's such a fantastic episode. However, by the end of it all, having finished Dark Now, the question that I ask myself is, was it even real? Did it even really matter? Those are the questions that I would like to leave you with, and I'm very much looking to hearing your input from as well. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed my thoughts here on the ending of Dark. If you did, you can actually watch me react to the show for the first time over on my channel. Those reactions are still going up on a weekly basis, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We are also a little bit further ahead on Patreon as well, should you be interested in watching even more. From here on out, I plan on actually making videos like this on a weekly basis where I go over all my thoughts on the shows that I'm currently watching on the channel. And over on Patreon, you can support me over on the lowest tier and get early access to the next video already. Next week, I'm going to be talking about Steins Gate and giving you all some of my thoughts about that, having finished the show very recently as well. Go and check all of that out. Your support would be very much appreciated. And then with that being said, I want to thank you all a lot for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you back in a next video.